Love Akron Live! Good job, that music. Oh, there we go. Oh my goodness. So good to see everyone here. My name is Benjamin Beaver. Welcome to Love Akron Live. And I just spilled some coffee. And if you notice these nice big bags under my eyes, yes, I didn't, but I got to be around. We had our fourth baby just this last week. And we are excited. We are loving it, but we are not, in fact, sleeping, which is very fun. A couple quick things before we jump in. One, our guests today are just amazing people. I actually just get to meet them for the first time, but Coach was telling me all about all the wonderful things they've done in the community, and I'm just excited to have this discussion around mental health, and specifically this idea of the grief recovery method. It's going to be very interesting. Before we jump in, though, I want to mention our sponsors for all of Love Akron and Love Akron Live in 2020 through 2021, Cap Trust, as well as Pegs Foundation. They are wonderful people that make this possible. Please, if you could, just in the comments area, whether you're on YouTube or whether you're on Facebook, could you just let me know how many cups of coffee you might have had today? Because I might be on number 3 at this point, which is exciting. So they'll have to slow me down in this interview just a little bit because I'm just flying. But let's go ahead and bring on my coach, my brother from another mother who is muted right now. So when he comes on, it'll be very nice. But let's see if... ladies, are you there as well? I'm asking to unmute real quick. And I'll get on our gallery. So starting there with Tracy, Miss Tracy Carter. Well, one, hi.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Oh, man. I haven't slept a wink, but I am great because...
I need whatever you're drinking because it's just
mad
energy times 10. So I'm receiving it. Thank
Tracy, you. And why are you with us today?
Why? I'm here because Kemp, who is an amazing leader, ambassador for Love Akron, asked me to come and talk about African Americans and mental health and to talk about some of the work we're doing with Lisa and others to make sure African Americans have access to mental and emotional support so that they can lead their best lives, given all that's happening. So I look forward to sharing more throughout today's presentation.
Me too, and don't worry. You don't have to say all those nice things about Coach. We can be honest on here while we're waiting on him. Coach, I saw your mic turned up.
I'm back.
Literally one of the greatest coaches of our time. How about Miss Lisa? Who are you? Where are you coming from? And I see Healing Hearts swag right
Yes,
behind.
do you see it stuck in the background? I try to make sure it's in the screen at all times. So I am Lisa McCraney, and I am a mental health therapist here in Akron. I have a private practice called Healing Hearts Counseling and Consultation Services. 6 years in existence, growing slowly but surely, serving all people, but I have a heart for the African American community, the faith-based community, and just those who feel like counseling has never been an option for them. One of my missions is to debunk the myths about counseling as it pertains to Black people and counseling as it pertains to faith-based people, that we can have both Jesus and a therapist. And then I also work side by side with Tracy in terms of doing some grief recovery work. I am a certified grief recovery specialist, certified this past March, and working to help people understand what grief is, what grief looks like, feels like, and how we can also move and continue on in life and not let grief run the conversation.
I love it. And I would just say too, you did ask the question, who I am, how did I get to this table? So I am an Akron resident. I work in Akron. My volunteer work, I have been a volunteer with Love Akron in the past. I've been a donor. I have been reconnected with Love Akron through my work in trying to help faith-based leaders access this grief recovery method that I know personally works. I had a chance to be exposed to it because I attend a word church in Akron, and I've experienced some losses in my life. A divorce, I've experienced a miscarriage, and one of the resources or supports that my church offered was the grief recovery method. And so I have personal experience with it, and I've had an opportunity to work in Cleveland around their infant mortality crisis through a collaborative called First Year Cleveland. And the committee that I co-chair with a young lady by the name of Sabrina Roberts, we are all focused on pregnancy and infant loss and how we can better help African-American parents deal with their loss, deal with their pain. And one of the solutions that we are activating is the grief recovery method. And so that is how I became involved or connected with Lisa, because she actually also works up in Cleveland. And this method we want more widely available to our Akron community, because we both live and work here too. So look forward to unpacking that and why it matters now more than ever, particularly as we move through some major public health crises as a nation and locally.
Wow, man, I am pumped about this conversation, and you just hit like so many different great things all at once. I want to get to that, but real quick for both of you, give me the skinny on this coach guy. Has he always been this way? Be honest. I mean, this is an open environment. Don't worry, we're sharing it to everyone. He's starting down there with you, Lisa.
Look at him shaking his head already.
Who is this coach guy? Is he that big of a deal? Like what is this guy?
Coach Kemp. Go ahead, Tracy.
I just met him, to be honest. Within the last couple of months, I've heard about the legend and intersected with him with the change direction of faith committee as part of our local alcohol and drug mental health board. And we just started talking about what can we do differently, better, more effectively to help a certain population, African American, who continues to have an alarming rate of mental health disparities, mental health inequities occurring within their individual and family and community dynamics. And had some conversation with he and others on the committee to say, hey, I'm working up in Cleveland. There's this tool that we're activating to actually supply or equip people with something that's proven. The grief recovery method is something that works. And just had a conversation with Kemp about, hey, let's try and figure out how to get Akron faith leaders aware, involved, embracing this tool so we can be more effective with our own pastoral ministry walks and our personal walks, because Lisa can tell you that this grief recovery method is can be practiced by anyone. And it not only helps the person that's delivering the method, but those who are receiving it. And so having a conversation with Kemp about it, he was like, he lit up, he got it, said, I want more, I'm in. So I just appreciate him having an open mind and heart to receive something that could actually better support people who are hurting.
And I met Coach years ago. I don't even know how many years is it, Kemp, that he and I used to work together at, when I was there, it was Pastoral Counseling Service. It is now Red Oak Behavioral Health. I was a therapist, and at that time, he was a case manager, and then he jumped up roles and became the director of something, but he put on his suit and started running things. But Kemp and I have worked together for years. He and my husband were case managers together there as well. So just a big family connection in terms of just really wanting to serve people. What I've always loved about Kemp is his heart for people to hear the other story that they're not saying, that the other story that they're afraid to say, and really going deeper with people, going the extra mile for people. So even as he began to take on an administrative role, when we were at Pastoral Counseling Service, people come to the table, we have numbers, we have deliverables that need to be done. And what I've always appreciated about Kemp being at the administrative table was he never forgot to speak on behalf of the people who were delivering. the people who were being asked to do the service. And so I've always admired him in that. I thought it was a natural transition for him to be to take over Love Akron. It's like, who else better to do the job other than Coach Boyd? Watching his love for the kids on the football field. When I saw him on the news crying, I start crying too. Like, that's just that's just what we're gonna do. But the things that are happening for him and the work that he's doing in the community, both when he worked in the mental health field with me, but now the work that he's doing within Love Akron is phenomenal. It's who he is. It oozes out of his pores. He can't speak without speaking of Love Akron. It's anything other than that would be I probably would make him sick because it's just who he is. And so I love being connected to him both in word and in deed.
This was a lot. I'm blushing. Y'all can't tell, but I am. But I appreciate the words, and at least let me help you. I'm gonna give you, because I'm noticing you don't got enough blue in your office. I'm gonna give you some blue and white to put in your office back there. You know what I'm saying? Give you a little bit more color. You know what I'm saying? And that's the inside joke between me and Lisa. But I gotta give you some blue and some white. And I know you.
Is he talking about Phi Beta Sigma, Lisa?
No doubt about it. You already know. Blue Phi. What's going on? You already know. So. No. Thank you. And listen, for those
I'm allergic to blue. I'm allergic.
For anybody that don't know, Lisa has the best mom in the world. She took care of me for years at Pastoral Council Red Oak. She always brought like a little thing of greens in for me every time she made them. She took care of me, man, like a mom to me. I know she just retired, so
yes,
man, thank God for that and for her. So you give her a big hug when you see her.
I will. And Kemp, I had to beg her to retire. Like, she kept trying to figure out a way. And I'm like, Mommy, no, it is time to, my mom has been working since she was 14. And even in retirement, I think she's going to sit down for a little bit and then she's going to find something else to do. And I don't blame her. We laughed last week because she jumped up. She heard the neighbor's car door close and she jumped up and went running because she thought she was late to work. And then it occurred to her that she didn't have to go to work anymore.
I have to go to work no more. Man, that's a blessing.
Yeah. Lisa, do you think your mom, with the topic today, grief, maybe grieving over that change? Because that's one of the things for the
definitely.
Definitely know that grief is normal and it's a natural emotion to any change in life. I share with you all my changes with divorce and miscarriage. A change in job is significant. So
yes, and especially because she has always worked. I've never not known my mom to work, which is why I work. Even when I was building Healing Hearts, I kept interviewing for jobs because it was a faith move for me. And building this business has really built my faith muscle and forced me to regularly answer the question, do I trust God? Because as money wasn't coming in, I thought, well, wait a minute, I got to do something different because Mommy has always worked. And so I know this will be a significant change for her. We are encouraging her to sit just a little bit. And kind of get her bearings. My mom has lupus and she has rheumatoid arthritis, and there have been some kind of things that she just kind of pushes through and always has. And so she's going to take a vacation to Texas where my sister is for about a month and a half, probably relocate down there because it's better for her body to be in those warmer climates. But I would not put it past Mommy to find her a 10 to 2 something, and again, and Kemp will tell you, Mommy just becomes everybody's mom. She was the office mom. She loved on all of us. She got on you if you needed it, and so if anybody that's ever spent any amount of time with her over these 42 years it was that she was in the workforce, will tell you that she did not mince words, but she loved you very, very well. So I know that she's going to go through a bit of a grieving process in terms of not having to show up again. She literally went running. So I told her some of the things that I do in therapy, like I leave myself notes all over the place. And so I told her, You need to put notes in places so that when you show up in that rush, you can remind yourself, oh, I don't have to go there today.
Yeah.
Right. But I also know that she's not going to sit for long. And part of the grief recovery method that we do and that we teach is helping people to develop a new narrative. Right. That even though we've lost something or there's been a significant change, that our life doesn't necessarily have to end at that space. Like we don't die there too. We don't lose out there too, but we actually have a great opportunity to make some new narratives. So
Okay. Let me ask this, because both of you touched on this, and I want us, and I love how intentional and specific both of you were when we started talking about whether it's mental health or grief recovery method. Both of you mentioned the Black community, the African American community, right? And in a time that we're living in with this racial tension, COVID, all these different things going on, you know, sometimes people will say, well, mental health is it's an everybody thing. It's not about race. It's not about culture, not about any of these type of things. But I want to lean into what you said, Lisa, that I grew up with the stigma of mental health. You know, that's not something that we talked about at the dinner table in the Boyd house. You know, we didn't talk about that. That's something, and I'm going to say it, but that's something white folks did. You know what I'm saying? Like, we went to church and we prayed at the altar and God was going to heal all that. So in both of your experiences, tell me right now, how is mental health really impacting the African American community now versus maybe what it was due to everything that's going on?
You know, I think from a clinical standpoint, I think COVID has, of course, we know that COVID has been very devastating, and we've lost so many lives. I personally have lost relatives and very close friends to COVID, and know people who have lost as well. But what I do appreciate about COVID is COVID has slowed everybody down. And forced us to look within, right? When your options of doing and going and being, you know, the things that as a community we've always done, we've always found something to do, we've always found a way to gather, we've always found a way to kind of keep going. And COVID caused all of us to sit down. And what I found with everybody in a generalized statement, but particularly with the population that I serve, is that when we have had the opportunity to sit with ourselves, we have been quite shocked with what we've come up with what we see looking back at us in the mirror. The reality is that we all have learned, particularly our community, the Black community has learned for generation upon generation upon generation to pull ourselves up by whatever bootstraps, shoe straps, ground straps, whatever it is, to find something to grab hold of to and keep going. And COVID washed all of that out of the window. And what we found is that people who could mask depression, people who could kind of work through anxiety and frustration, even anger, that those things became very real and very loud in this COVID community. And we weren't able to really say, I don't have anything going on or I'm okay, because most people found that we were not okay. And if it wasn't COVID, then our racial climate definitely stirred up some things that had sat dormant for a very long time. And we got to a place where the community began to say, but it was a community cry, but it touched something to the core of people's being, where we get to that space that your mom always tells you about, where when you know when enough is enough, it's enough. And people started feeling the angst of, I don't like this. I don't like what I'm feeling. I don't like what is happening around me. I found people were angry and didn't know what to do with it. People were saddened and didn't know what to do with it. And the reason we didn't know what to do with it is because at the Gadsden house, we didn't talk about mental health either. Right. In most people's homes, we don't talk about this kind of stuff. It wasn't a thing. Right. What happens in our house stays in our house, even if it's trash. Even if it's garbage, what happens in our house stays in our house. And so when we bumped up against a COVID and a racial climate, we were like, hold on, wait a second, because we didn't know what to do. Even in terms of things like emotional regulation, even identification, we just have not ever had those kinds of conversations. Number one, in a Black house, you better get those emotions together. We
Come on
weren't
now.
allowed to. We weren't allowed to express those things. You better be happy or go sit down somewhere. You know, you got to go find some happy, right? And so even being able to identify that I'm something other than happy, and even if we talked about emotions, we have not done very well teaching people anything other than happy, sad, mad, right? And so being able to have a language underneath that, like what else? Because I'm not happy, I'm something, but we don't use words like elated or overjoyed, right? I'm not sad, but I am discombobulated, right? We don't use those kinds of narratives. And so when people started getting bumped up against these kinds of COVIDs and racial unrest and family unrest and losing jobs and what have you, and just anxiety about our future, people didn't know what to do, because we have done a disservice, as particularly when I think of the Black community and the faith-based community. I can't say that we've always done a good job of letting people know that it's okay to have real big confusing emotions and have Jesus too. That's a whole nother day's conversation. Right. But I'll digress for a second.
No, because you said a lot. You said a lot in that, and I was man, and that was a lot being said, because I was just I'm at the Akron Zoo. I'm on location today, right?
Okay.
I'm in this leadership program with Heart to Heart. Shout out to Jeremy Lau and Heart to Heart people. But the CEO of the zoo, Akron Zoo, Doug, he said this today when he was presenting. He said, we feel first and think second. And he said it has to be okay, because there's no right or wrong to it. It's just how someone feels. And that's exactly what you're getting into, Lisa, to where, man, I'm thinking about this growing up, man, the number of times, and I've said this as a parent, happened to me this morning. My son, he was asked to do something. He saw himself, he's just barking. And then I say, son, you can't do that. Then he begins to cry. And what do I immediately do? Hey, man, stop crying. Right? Stop crying. And my father did that to me. Yeah, what you crying for? My father did that to me, right? It was like, what you crying for, man? You got it. And we go into this state of false masculinity, right? That we're these men, and we're supposed to do this, that, and the third. And so in my interaction of first meeting Tracy, Tracy's on with Bishop Johnson, Pastor Dennis, Minister Devontae Lavender from over at the Word Church, Robert DeJeanette, and she's talking about this grief recovery method. And I'm like, first of all, okay, what is this? But as you began to talk, Tracy, and I heard the testimony of these men, these were men. And in our society, these are men, meaning that they're pastors, right? They're leaders, they're known. I mean, you say Bishop Johnson anywhere in the city, right? Like people, oh man, yeah, Bishop Joy or whatever. But what I felt was with this vulnerability to say, first of all, I didn't realize that I had all this bottled up, right? Because that's what we do, right? We suppress a lot in the Black community, and I give the image of pushing down the trash. Well, what do you do when you see a trash can overflowing? Well, I put my foot in it and I push down because there's more room. And so I realized that even within myself, I was doing this emotionally. I was suppressing a lot of things. So when I heard Tracy say, and these other men, right, say, men of God say, hey, listen, you may grieve the loss of a job. And I didn't even think about grief from that perspective. Like I didn't even think about mental health from that perspective. So Tracy, I need you to give our listeners just a good whole understanding of this grief recovery method, because for some of our listeners, this is the first time they've heard anything like this. But for such a time as this, so I and I think, everyone, go ahead.
Yes, Pastor. And just grief, as we said, is normal. It's a natural emotional to any change or loss in life. And we've talked about some of our losses. Most people think of death, divorce, moving, losing a job is significant. Health changes, people with diabetes, those who have been affected with COVID. There's a loss in health status, so that will cause you to grieve as well. And then Bishop does a great job talking about the intangible things that happen to us that we may not recognize. It affect our mind and our heart, but your loss of hopes, dreams, expectations, the loss of safety, trust, security, respect, faith, dignity, all of those can cause you to go, if you lose those, it causes you to go into a place where you need some mental and emotional support. The grief recovery method that we're working with Love Akron and others around to implement more broadly among the faith community, particularly the African American, given the historic and present health inequities and disparities I mentioned. The grief recovery method has been around for 40 years. It's proven, it's action oriented. You got to do some work to get better. There's no magic wand. You got to sit and go through some steps to discover some truths about yourself, as Lisa said, and come up with some healthy ways in terms of coping and moving toward a better place mentally and emotionally. There's a set number of sessions that people go through. Most can complete the sessions in 7 to 8 weeks. It can be done in a one-on-one versus a group format. And it's often facilitated by a grief recovery specialist. These individuals have done the work. They've gone through grief recovery themselves. I did it through 12 weeks. Lisa went through it as well. But there is a certification process that people go through, 4 days intensive, going through the method so that you will be in a stronger place with your heart to deal with your own personal pain and help others move through their pain as well. And so we're really excited to be working on a plan locally to introduce that more broadly to the African-American faith community, so that as people who are really frontline in terms of helping people when they experience an emergency or tragedy, they'll have the tools they need to be more effective in moving people to a better emotional and mental state. And for Lisa, I know she experienced it at a time where she just lost her father, and she can tell you about that. But it works. This method works for the rest of your life. It works for any loss. And it's something that I encourage your listeners to learn more about, because it's something that can help them not only in their household, but out in the community, in the faith environment, as they intersect with others in life.
Let me go here 1 second. I see your hand up, Ben. I'm gonna get you in a minute.
See that hand.
Tell me something, Tracy. If you can say something, if you can just tell us, who's helping to lead this charge? What organization is helping to lead this charge?
Love Akron.
Come on now, you better say it. You better
From a
say
noun
it
to
now.
a verb. We're going to help people love better because their heart is going to be dealt with more effectively.
I'm going to say something really controversial right now, okay? Because you said something. You said something about a magic wand. And here's what I want to say. For the faith community, have we in the past, has prayer been our magic wand?
Absolutely. We have often treated even just our faith and Jesus as if he's a genie in a bottle, right? I'm just going to pray about it, and one day God is just going to make it better, as if better is just going to miraculously drop out of the sky. And I think sometimes we negate that every story that we read in the Bible, every parable, each of those people who got a miracle had to participate. They had to participate. Somebody had to
say that again. Hold on. You got to say that again.
I said everybody we find in there and within scripture that received a miracle had to participate. Somebody had to go dip, in the Jordan. Somebody had to actually receive Jesus' saliva on their eyes, right? And then he had to speak out and say, I see me in his trees walking, so that he could actually say, you helped me, but there's a bit of a distortion. Right? Things are, I kind of got it, but I don't quite have it. Everybody who received a miracle had to participate, and healing is no different. As a
Amen.
matter of fact, the scriptures tell us, it says, I believe it's James 5:16. It says, confess your faults one to another and pray for one another so that you may be healed. So if nothing else, your participation has to be in the confession. You got to tell somebody you're going through something. You got to tell somebody this isn't working for me. You got to tell somebody I'm pissed beyond measure and I don't even know why. Right.
Yes.
And it's okay to even say those words. We get so, there's a letter portion that we have to write within the grief recovery method. And it's something that I actually use in therapy as well. And when I tell people to kind of write letters out on paper, because paper can't talk back. But when I tell people to write letters, I tell them, don't write the church letter.
That's
Don't
right.
write it like the pastor going to read it. I need you to write that letter uncut raw.
That's right.
Because sometimes we'll put these barriers on and not tell the whole truth.
Yeah.
We'll tell some of the truth. We'll tell bits and pieces of the truth. But even in our healing, we're so guarded of other people that we negate our full healing. We negate the full thing, right? Who was it? Was it not Naaman's? Was it not Naaman's servant that said, had he told you to go to some special place, right, you would have done it, but because he's telling you to go here, a place that you think is beneath you, you are negating your healing. You're negating the full deliverance that's necessary for you because you think there's this thought process, this faulty messaging that you have. And the grief recovery method, in addition, now the grief recovery method is not therapy, but it has therapeutic benefits. But even doing the work helps you to see, if I do the work will work.
And
So-
what I'm excited about, I'm sorry, Kemp, is what Lisa and I and others, as we've been working on as the Cleveland, is the more we get African Americans aware and engaged with this method, it opens them up to talking about what happened and giving them the tools so that they can do the work, continue to do the work for life to get better. And also when they're ready, say, you know what, I am now ready to talk to a therapist. Because let's be real, some people need some advanced care, some acute care, and that's fine too. And so the work we're doing, the work Love Akron will be doing, is making sure African Americans know that it's okay to say, I'm not okay. I need a little more than Jesus and prayer to get me through. And that's something that I'm excited about, is that we're changing the narrative about African Americans and mental health, because it's just as important as our physical health. And that's something we're saying too. Most people are accustomed to going to a doctor at least once a year for that physical checkup. We need to be doing mental as well, because the mind also impacts the body. And we know when the mind is not well, the body will likely not be well. So we got to pay attention to that too.
Good.
Quick question.
Go ahead, Ben.
We jokingly around the office call me the ignorant white male that's learning.
No, Ben calls himself that. Let's get that straight.
All right, we'll get it straight. But hearing about this, and I have my own mental health journey that I've been on. Is it like a steps program? Like I don't know if I'm just not seeing it quite yet, because I hear it's not therapy, but it has therapeutic values. Like if you were to take me from like, hey, I don't know if I have an issue or not, like take me from like step 1 to 10, and I know it gets really deep within those things, but give me kind of an overview of what would it look like to go through this?
So you want to take it, Tracy, or you want me?
I'll start and you follow. So what we've developed in Cleveland and what we're going to do in Akron is to first make sure people are assessed, to complete a questionnaire to make sure you are in the right bucket of support. So for example, if we go through this assessment and someone like Lisa says, Ben, you're perfect for grief recovery right now, given where you are with your assessment results. Your results could come back and say, you know what, I need to send you to an advanced doctor right now. And that's okay. But once you are assessed and we determine that you're right for the grief recovery method, Lisa can talk you through what you'll experience thereafter. Lisa, from a clinical
And from a clinical perspective, in terms of grief recovery, again, you can do it in a 7-week one-on-one, or you can do it in an 8-week extended group process. In the group process, you'll be attend with a group of people, not too big, because this work is really it's really intimate and personal, and so we don't do it in a room full of 30 people. And so it's going to be a small group, probably no more than 10. There's some partner work that you do, but literally each week kind of just helps you do a little more of the work. There's a book that goes along with it. Do I have my book?
I have
with
my
me?
book right here.
Do you? Okay, so
book.
she has hers with you. Mine's right in front of me, but we utilize the Grief Recovery Handbook, which was written, and let me just note that it was written, and the founders of the Grief Recovery Method are not clinicians. They're just regular people, regular men who experience traumatic grief. And as they healed through the process, they began to write what that experience was like for themselves. And the method grew as a result of 2 men who experienced significant losses and found themselves not just being finding the support for themselves, but then also being a support network for other people. One of the authors, I believe it was John Russell, who said, I believe he owned a TV store, and he found that people were coming in not to purchase televisions, but to see how he was still standing upright after the significant loss that he had. Like, how do you do this every day? And so just some simple practical things that they began to develop then grew into such an amazing method, because he went from 1 or 2 people coming to the store to let's just have a group around it and let's talk through it. And so it is a process. It's not necessarily like a 12-step, there's something that you would do with AA, but it is very intensive in terms of helping you think about the narratives that you use. What are your thoughts? What do you come into the room with in terms of what you even think grief is? Most people think grief has to do with just the death of a loved one. But grief has, and I'll read our definition of it. Grief is the normal and natural reason, the normal and natural process or our reaction to change or loss of any kind. So that's it, our normal and natural reaction to change. And then number 2 is the conflicting feelings caused by the end of or change in a familiar pattern. So it could be that somebody passed away. It could be that we got a new CEO at work and they work definitely different than the person I've been with for the last 5 years. Right? That's grief. Right? Wow. Grief could be, and I've experienced work grief. Right? When CEOs change, and the person who used to let you take an additional mental health day decides that mental health isn't important, that's a grieving process. Right? It could be that we move like I did in the 5th grade in the middle of the school year. That's grief as well. And totally change school.
So I'm here. And once again, I do jokingly call myself the ignorant white male. I mean that in the definition of it, where I'm never going to know exactly what it's like to be Kemp, and but I'm learning, and that's what I want to do. So with that though, like, do you, in the African American community, in the Black community, is it something that, like, I heard earlier that personally the language isn't used? Is this idea of grief being more than just death? Like, because I would say that as a white male growing up, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what grief is. It's tissues after a funeral, right? And you're like, no, it's much more. Can you just speak to like what 2020 real examples? What would be grief in 2020 for a Black man or woman in Akron?
What witnessing nonstop what happened to George Floyd,
over and over again on TV.
Been served for Breonna Taylor, being disturbed by what happened to Ahmaud Arbery. For us, and Lisa can talk to this. A lot of the world saw those situations unfold before their eyes. But African Americans, we've endured and witnessed this for generations. It's nonstop. The trauma and seeing your people constantly attacked, harmed, killed, murdered, disregarded, minimized, discounted. That's a lot for a individual, for a family, for a community to endure. And so you can't tell me we don't have mental and emotional things to unpack by those experiences. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Ben. For us, yes, everyone in experiences grief, but it seems like for when you can't compare pain, you shouldn't compare pain, but I could just say for the African American experience, it's been quite a journey.
It's an everyday,
yes,
nonstop, over and over, generation from generation, grieving again. You often see people saying, I thought we were done with this.
Yeah.
You know, as we have arguments about what systemic racism is and does it even exist, right? There's a whole grief narrative that comes with that, being that your very true and real reality is being dismissed by someone else, yet you have to live it every single day. And all of those things, and those are just two. We're talking about, the social unrest and the attacks on, unarmed Black people and all of that. Those are just two examples. But grief is also showing up in a room and being the best qualified for the job and still not being invited to the table, right? Or being invited to the table. So you're invited, but you are not welcome to eat. You get to sit there. You know, so it's so many. We could have so many conversations about what this would look like. Now, when we think about this method, now my heart, of course, is, I spoke a lot about doing the work within the African American community because that's my heartbeat in terms of I lived enough stories, and including my own, of knowing now that I'm able to look back at age 44, I should have been diagnosed with anxiety and depression as a kid, but I didn't show up to counseling. Even as a clinician, I didn't show up to counseling myself until 2017.
Come on.
Right? Because we just don't do the work, and we're not necessarily given permission. Most of the work I did in counseling for 18 months was telling myself it was okay to tell my truth, even if people didn't agree with it.
Ooh-wee. Come on.
Right. And so that's grief as well, is being the person to break the norm, being the person to break the cycle, to not do what everybody else is doing, to be the person that says what happened in this house shouldn't have stayed in this house and is not going to stay in my house.
Amen.
Right. And there's a grief that comes along with it. There's a grief that comes along with of not meeting the expectation of a family. Right. There's grief that comes along with leaving your church that you've been at your whole life. And literally, when my husband and I 6 years ago left the church that I had been at for 7 years, somebody in my family said, "We don't leave our church." What you mean you going to a new church? Literally,
there for life.
What you mean? We don't leave our church.
Yeah.
And so there's a grief that comes along with it. Relationships were lost when we left that church. I discovered that people who I thought were really good friends of mine didn't call anymore and didn't necessarily respond to my calls when I called them. Right? That was a grieving process. And I didn't leave the Lord. I just left church locations. I didn't throw Jesus away, but I did decide to experience him at a new address.
Amen.
So let me, man, this is it's like this, because what I like is that, first of all, it's expanding capacity, right? I think of not only just us, but I even think about Ben, Ben saying, hey, it's I don't know, when we talk about ignorance, right? And so we talk a lot at Love Akron about listening to understand versus listening to defend.
Amen.
right?
There's a
And
difference.
so it's a difference, right? And so the one thing I've appreciated in my relationship with Ben, and even in this call, is that Ben is on this call with 3 African Americans, right? And so some of this stuff Ben has heard because I've said it, but it's so affirming when it's like, Lisa, you're saying a lot of things that I said to Ben because I said it's different. You know, the way church is looked at in the Black community, not saying it's better nor worse, it's just different.
It's just different.
It's just different because, you know, that's the church, that's the pastor. The pastor done been the pastor for 75 years, right? Like there ain't no firing the pastor. He's the pastor. You know what I'm saying? And so,
ring, man.
and so I love the definition that you said about grief. And I think it was the second one because it made me think about Ben. And me and Ben, and you know, we just don't do this together, but this is my brother. I consider Ben a brother. I consider him a friend. And Ben just recently, him and his wife, they had their 4th child.
Congratulations.
Little Leland James.
Man, Leland James. Oh, love that kid.
And I remember Ben, and I'm gonna put some things out here, and I'm sure Ben don't mind. He might, but he'll tell me later.
Please.
But I remember we were talking yesterday, and Ben was like, "Man, for 2 months, the word wasn't dreaded. What word did you use, Ben?"
I was terrified because we lived in a very different reality when we had our 3rd, and so all this fear started growing up to it. And I think I know where you're going with this, Coach, because it's this thing of like, and I just told Coach yesterday, I was like, man, I kind of psyched myself out there, bud. Like, I thought everything was going to revert to my old life as soon as we had a baby, like, which isn't logical. If you know, we can connect more about my story at another time. But like, but is that grief? Like, I don't know where that falls in it, where it's this like fear of the future thing, but like.
Well, so grief talks about, there's a piece where we talk about unfinished business and expectations and things like that, unfinished conversations. And part of how we operate now does have a lot to do with the things we wished we had said or wished others had said to us.
That's
right.
Good.
And so they become foundational things for us, those woulda, shoulda, couldas, wished, and that unfinished conversation that then the foundation, we start laying bricks for permanency in our lives because things weren't said and things weren't done necessarily the way we thought. And so when we do the grief recovery method, it allows us to take a sledgehammer and knock those foundational things away that have been pushing us up and holding us hostage in a sense. It's like wanting to move, but your feet are in cement. And the grief recovery method then allows you to at least begin to think about how you can take the sledgehammer to those foundational things that are forever and permanent, or at least they were presented to you as if they had to be. Right. And you can do something different. One of the key things that I learned in therapy, and I keep a picture of it with me in my phone, is she talked to me about the barriers and the boundaries that I had put up. And one day, because my wrestle, particularly with my dad, and so Tracy shared with you, when I showed up to be certified for grief recovery, when I walked in the door, I was 2 weeks 2 weeks away from my dad having passed away. I was uncut and raw. Not just because I lost my dad, but I was in a swarm of emotion because my dad and I didn't always have a great relationship. And we were finally on a trajectory where we were trying to figure it out. And then he's gone. I had not seen, other than the day before he passed, prior to that, I hadn't seen my dad in 6 months. Right? We were working on some things. We were trying to figure us out as adults. And we had battled with that for years, trying to figure us out. And so then he died, and all of this stuff, all of these unfinished things, all of the daddy-daughter relationship never developed. I was never daddy's little girl, and I never will be, because he's gone now. Right? And so I went in raw and unsure and asking God, now, Lord, literally my thing with the Lord is, okay, Lord, I guess this what we doing now. right? And so, and I'll back up, because when I went to therapy, part of my therapy work that I was doing was the wrestling match that I used to do with myself with, how do I honor my mother and father, particularly my father, when this man really, how do I do that? And I wrestled with that. And one of the things that my clinician said to me was, life and your experience with him has taught you how to put up this brick boundary, which is necessary. You need that boundary. You need those barriers. But the wrestle was, I wanted to be able to take him down, but every time I took a brick down, he gave me another reason why I needed to put the brick back up. And so what she taught me was that I could still create a boundary, but utilize different, I didn't always have to have bricks as a material. Right. And so as I began to take down things that weren't necessary, like I didn't need this particular boundary with my dad today because things were different, but I did need a boundary. And so in my mind, I actually began, instead of having a brick wall, for him, I had a brick foundation, brick columns, but I was able to get a wrought iron fence to go in between he and I. Right. Because I still needed a boundary in certain areas with him, but it didn't all have to be brick. Because brick, literally, you can't see in or out of brick. But when I come up to a fence, she said, Lisa, well, instead of walls, can we think of fences? Absolutely. Because when I come up to a fence, we can at least have an exchange, even if I have a barrier there. I'm afraid of big dogs, right? But I can come talk to you at your house if you have a big dog, because dog on your side and I'm gonna stay on my side, right?
And the gate can open and close.
And the gate can open and close as I need it to. So if I want to come on your side because the gate opens and closes, I can. But I can still stay on my side for the time that I need that protection or what have you. Now, there were some foundational pieces with my dad and I that I had to have a brick no matter what, which is why the picture that I had in my mind was brick columns, wrought iron fence. You understand? I even Googled it so that I could see, because I saw a picture in my mind, and I Googled brick and wrought iron fences until I found one that looked like what I needed, so that it could make sense to me while I did the work with him. So then when I showed up to be grief recovery certified after he died, I was like, now, Lord, I don't even know what this means. But on day 2, in my notes, I have them. I keep them right next to me. These are my GRM notes. I keep them right here next to me because I reference them regularly. And on day 2 of my notes, I say, it's written in there, circled with a heart, I'm learning how to love my dad more in his death than I ever knew how to do in his living.
Come on now, man.
That's the work that grief recovery allows you to do. It allows you to do the work that you couldn't do with your mouth. It allows you to do that, have those and the thing is, I didn't need my dad present for me to have those, to resolve those unfinished conversations. He didn't need to be there.
Listen, y'all done went to some places, man. I'm about to start shouting. Listen, listen, Tracy.
Yes, sir.
For our audience that is out there listening, how do they connect with this method? How do they get more information? How does that happen for them?
Well, they can actually go to the Grief Recovery Institute. If they go to the Grief Recovery Institute, which is nationally recognized, this method is practiced across the world. They can type in their zip code and find a certified grief recovery specialist. The good news is Lisa is one of your specialists in Akron. Yes. Bishop Joey Johnson is. Pastor Jeffrey Dennis. There will be a listing of individuals people can turn to say, I need help. And as we've shared on this broadcast, the grief definition is expansive, it's inclusive, beyond death, divorce, relationship loss, job loss, health loss, even pet loss, loss of dignity, hope, security, safety. All of those moments will get you into a place of grieving. And these people have been trained to help you walk through the process so you can get better.
Yes, we have a program for children. So we don't offer the program to children. We offer it to the adults of children who are grieving. And so again, and people don't think of pet loss. right?
It's
But we have a pet loss component. But when people have fur babies, and they lose those, I've seen the looks on people's faces and the sheer devastation of losing a pet. And so they try to make sure that they cover every, component that we would experience, because again, children who grieve, it's a huge loss when you leave school in the 5th grade in the middle of the school year, right? That is grief. And so those are things that you want to think about. And again, we have so many certified people, and realistically, Coach Boyd and Ben, we have people throughout a lot of our ministries that are grief recovery certified, that can run groups, and are running some groups. That I think if we just tap into it and we're able to teach people the importance that everybody grieves. Right. Grief is no respecter of persons. It's going to show up at everybody's door, not just in death, but just in change. Right. Realistically, if I were to go out on a limb, I would say that grief is the foundational anchor to almost every problem we face. You show me a trauma, I'll show you grief. You show me you show me some addiction, I'll show you grief. Because it's the heart of the matter, right? You said something about the emotions, and I keep sticky notes all over. I have a sticky note on my desk that says, oftentimes we get so caught up in the emotion, and the note says we have to get beyond the heat of the matter, which is the emotion, and get to the heart of the matter, right? Trauma is what happens to us. Addiction, that's what happens to us. Grief is what is left behind. And that's what we want to work on. So when you see people, when they show up, right? A lot of times we bump into people and we bump into their emotion, we bump into the heat, and we decide whether or not we want to deal with people because we bumped into the heat of them. And doing the work of this will allow you to be able to see them and say, I see something other than heat.
That's right.
I see something else there.
And the man, this is so good. Listen, we at Love Akron, we have chosen to be the lead organization to bring this into Akron. And Tracy, correct me if I'm saying anything wrong. And honestly, I'm humbled. I'm privileged for us to be able to do this, because this is us loving Akron. This is us stepping into a place that is probably a little sticky, probably a little bit murky, because really, honestly, we haven't really done that well, I would say, as a whole community, but in particular in the Black community. We haven't launched into this deep. We haven't leaned into it, because it is a culture shock to our culture, really talk about these type of things. But I'm truly thankful for Tracy, for Lisa, the leadership of Bishop Johnson, Robert DeJeanette, Pastor Dennis, and many, many others who have chosen to lean into the space. We are simply just looking to steward it as an organization and to bring it into Akron, because it is a need. It is a need. It's something else, man. As we look across Akron and we start looking at what are the needs, what are the gaps. This is a gap. This is the thing that is a gap that has went unnoticed for a long time. And this is what I want to say, because again, for our audience, I hope everybody's listening to understand, this is not saying that these things are not happening in the white community. That's not what we're saying.
Not at all.
What we're saying is we have been chosen to say, hey, we really got to see about what's happening in the Black community for such a time as this. Because there's things going on, there's things happening. And we encourage, man, if there's white brothers and sisters out here, man, that you got questions, man, you want a deeper understanding, please, man, reach out to us. Say, hey, man, I want to know more about it. I want to have a better understanding of it. Please reach out to us, because this is something that we are launching. Trace, we've launched this, right? We're launching it. What's the right thing for you?
Process of launching it. The goal would be for us to give this experience, this certification experience, to 10 individuals. We're looking at therapists, we're looking at clergy members, and just lay leaders who are throughout the community that will make the commitment to get this awareness, this understanding, again, to strengthen their own heart, so that they can better walk with others through their pain to a place of healing. And so within the next year, we will have netted 10 people who will be able to serve several dozen people. And from there, we like to continue to grow. This is a pilot program. We got to prove our outcomes, our results, and in that I trust we will be effective and efficient and attract more dollars so we can help more people get this tool in their tool belt when we talk about mental and emotional strength.
And for us, that's our bottom line. The grief recovery method is a part of our mental health and wellness initiative, which that is a part of our collective impact initiative. Again, this is not something that we're doing on our own as an organization, man, but we're doing this in tandem, in partnership, triangularly with as many people that want to be a part, because it's not about us, but this is about how can we help Greater Akron to thrive. And this is another way that we're doing that. And so I just want to thank you both. Thank you so much for committing the time to educate us and to also share your own personal stories. There was a lot of vulnerability here out of both of you to share your own grief and your own success and victory in overcoming that. So, man, thank you both for that. I'm gonna give you an opportunity, Lisa. I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm gonna catch some flack for it. But what sorority, sister, do you represent?
I am a member along with my sister Tracy.
Yeah,
we are members of.
See what I'm saying?
We are members of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, the one and the only.
See this? So y'all got to do all that. Why can't you just say?
Ben, I want to take back. I thought he was smart. I mean, to ask us that.
See what I'm saying?
I just told my son, he's only 11 and the other one, Ryan, will be 7 tomorrow. But I told the babies, marry a Delta. Everything is better with a Delta.
Listen, Ben, let's not have him back on no more. This is it. Let's archive this.
Hold on. Before he cuts you guys off and everything. This truly is though. I know we're laughing, but this is the start of the conversation. This is not the one time we do the live thing. I feel like we literally just got an ice cube off the iceberg.
Absolutely.
And I am excited about just getting to know you ladies and learning. Even for the ignorant white guy, learning this process, because we need it.
Listen, there's a statement that says hurt people, and we repeat that over and over and over again, and I just don't want to stay there. Hurt people do hurt people, but healed people, man, heal people.
Now, come on now.
Man, I think you might have had 3 book titles in this live stream.
Listen, my editor, it's so funny because I just got a message that I'm at the tail end of my first book. Praise the Lord. It's in edit right now.
What's it called?
But it's called More Than I Can Bear. And it talks about this notion that, we say the statement all the time, God won't give us more than we can bear. And in the book, I say, I beg to differ.
Oh, man. See, that right there is that's like your trailer where it just all goes black and we're coming soon.
Yes.
When is the book
coming? I beg to differ. But she tells me that I'm a walking quotable. She said, you just have so many one-liners. And those are that's what will stick with people. And it'll also make them call me back. Right.
Yeah.
Call me to do the next presentation. Call me to be your keynote. All of those things, I'm available. But it keeps the conversation going. And that's it. Christ talked to us about communing together by that example. Right. He said, behold, I stand at the door and knock. And if anyone should hear me and let me in, I'll come in and I'll commune, I'll dine, I'll sup with them. Our mission is to gather around the table and to have some conversations. And when we have some conversations and we confess our faults, we go right back to James. We have those conversations. I tell you what, some healing can get done around the table.
Come on now. Come on.
Man, with that.
You can edit out that last part about the greatest and all that stuff. Then we'll edit that out.
Marry a
Put
Delta.
this out to
You
people.
can edit it, but it's still, the fact will remain.
Yes. Get you a Delta. Everything is better
Edit
with
out
a
if you
Delta.
want to.
Well,
The fact will
to be
remain.
continued is what I'm hearing on this
Hey.
conversation, and we always try to end our live streams this way. Thank you, ladies, again, and this is part one of many conversations that we're going to have like this, because man, I walk away just thankful I got to be at the table with you.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
You bet. So all we got to say here at the end, ladies, is real simple. Just say "Love Akron." Coach is going to set it up, and then he's going to go like this, and then you guys say it. So, Coach.
So thanks again to our guests. Love you both. Appreciate you and all the work that you're doing. And listen, if you don't do anything else today, make sure that you love Akron.
Hey guys, thank you so much.
Right.
Blessing.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.